I believe parents should let their kids go broke, financially broke, up to and including bankruptcy. So before y'all start, throwing stones and writing that hate mail, okay, that would believe that parents should let their kids just fall flat on their face financially, and you think that's what I'm saying, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm saying. Welcome to another 10-minute series where I spend 10 minutes talking about a topic that I hope is meaningful and gives you food for thought. It's not for you to agree or disagree, but it's simply to give you a different perspective. Now then, on this particular series, I want to talk about why I believe parents should let their kids go broke, financially broke, up to and including bankruptcy. So before y'all start, throwing stones and writing that hate mail, okay, that would believe that parents should let their kids just fall flat on their face financially, and you think that's what I'm saying, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And let's talk about why I believe that as someone who's had multiple bankruptcies. Our 10 minutes is going to begin, and it's starting right now. All right, so as someone who's had a bankruptcy at approximately 23, 24 for credit card debt, about 24,000. This is like decades ago when I was 23, because I'm now 57. So I figure about 30 plus years ago. And then 10 years later, in my very early 30s, about 32, 33, I had another bankruptcy from a car I could not afford. Now, the first bankruptcy that occurred about 23, 24 over the credit card debt, I tried really hard to hide that from my parents, and I thought I was successful at it because, after all, my parents never discussed my finances. They never asked questions. I certainly never volunteered information. But it was only after I had the bankruptcy announcement printed in the paper. Excuse me. It was only after it had been printed in the paper, by the courts, because it's all public information, that did my parents ever say to me, "Oh, by the way, dear heart, we read about your bankruptcy. We saw it in the paper." But little did I know, they already knew I was struggling before then. I mean, come on. They're your parents. They know things before you know things. They probably know what you're going to think and do before you even know it. Now, I remember after I told my parents, after my parents told me that they were aware of my bankruptcy, for years I really kind of spent wondering, why wouldn't they have done anything? Why did they choose not to do anything? And how, there's that point where you sometimes question, how much do they really love you after all if they're just going to let you do that? But I was never angry with them for it, okay? Because I had been raised to be, a responsible adult, even though I wasn't very learned, so to speak, in the world of finance. But I was raised to accept my responsibilities, okay? Then I had another bankruptcy in my early 30s because of a vehicle that I had bought too much car. Like you see on TikTok, if this had been, if TikTok had existed back then, all right, when I was in my early 30s, I'd have been the one going, yeah, and I took my Nissan Sentra that was about $300 a month with manageable payments, and I took it and decided that I wanted a nicer car. And even though I'd only had the Nissan Sentra, I kid you not, that was a brand new car. Yeah, okay, brand new. I flipped it for a car that was about a year or so old. And I got myself into the Nissan Maxima because that's the car that made me look good, and that's the car I really wanted, but I couldn't afford the maintenance, the upkeep, yada, yada, and I wound up losing that car. It took me till, honestly, I was probably in my mid-30s, okay, late 30s. It really, really hit me why my parents didn't help me. Now, to some people, it may be obvious, well, they wanted you to learn a lesson. That's true. They wanted me to learn a financial lesson. They thought that would be a good thing for me to learn about, debt and how money works. But as I've gotten older and I've experienced more of life, I think there's a deeper lesson, and why I generally support it. I don't think parents should protect their kids from bad credit scores, home foreclosures, car repossessions, and bankruptcies. And it's not because my parents didn't do it for me. So I want to make clear, this is not a tit for tat thing. Not in any way. What it's about, in my discovery, my epiphany, you know what? Kids need to learn. And when I say kids, I know we're really talking young adults, okay? But we're going to use kids for simplicity's sake, all right? Kids need to learn what's worth fighting for. I did not really come up with that idea, I would say, until I was almost, probably close to 40 years old. And what do I mean by kids need to learn what's worth fighting for? Money is about more than just the dollars and cents. Okay, CENTS, okay? Money is about more than that. We are trained to look at money as, okay, you want something, it's $500. Do you actually have $500 to make that purchase? Whatever. $500, $50, it doesn't matter. But what we only learn, in my opinion, what we can only learn about money, what's worth fighting for, we can only learn that through experience, through loss, through missteps, financial loss, financial missteps, financial heartaches, the things that keep us awake at night, that have us working 2-3 jobs, that perhaps have us regretting getting a certain degree. I did not come to that realization, like I said, until I was nearly 40 years old. In this economy, where parents are jumping in, and we know they are, okay? Parents are jumping in. I got to save my kid from a bad credit score. I have to save my kid because rent's really high. I have to save my kid because Lord knows it's too dangerous to take the subway and I want them in a car. Name the excuse. And I admit I'm not a parent, all right? But I am someone who's had a very tumultuous financial history. And something I've learned is, had my parents rescued me financially, had they said, oh, Carrie, we don't want you to have a bankruptcy on your record, it's going to make it hard for you to get a job. We don't want a low credit score, it's going to make it hard for you to get the best auto insurance. How am I going to learn as an individual what is worth financially fighting for? And when I say what is worth financially fighting for, I'm talking about what's worth holding 2 jobs for. What is worth sacrificing financially? In other words, how much of my time, labor, in exchange for money, how much of that energy am I willing to battle? Something that I think parents need to do. And again, I'm not a parent, but I am speaking to you as a 19th year teacher. I'm speaking to you as someone who's had multiple bankruptcies. Had my parents bailed me out, I would have no idea what was worth fighting for. And if I finally did get a clue, it was going to happen way later in life. Perhaps at a time it was going to hurt my retirement, hurt relationships. It is very easy to want to look around and go, I need to protect my kids financially. Rent is high. And I know this video is going to possibly make some friends, but I really want you to understand, okay? I understand that rent is high. Cars are worse than they ever have been. But if your child is not taught what is worth fighting for, perhaps if rent is high, you need to get a roommate. I saw a TikTok video the other day, and this young lady, couldn't have been more than 22, 23, basically said, look, we should not have to have roommates. That's not the solution. Because she goes, we deserve not to have roommates. But here's the problem. That might actually be the solution. The solution might actually be, you know what? I'm not willing to stay up and fight every single night to hold 2-3 jobs just so I can live alone in this place that's financially bankrupting me. You may find that that's not worth fighting for, and the relief bringing on a roommate can bring to you financially and peace of mind, or the relief that renting a small room in someone's house, all right, something like that. You may find that driving that fancy car that's costing you $800, $9,000 a month, maybe even a car that's costing you $600, $700 a month, you may find that that's not worth fighting for. And perhaps it's easier to downsize the car. Perhaps if you're in a place that has great public transportation, you may go, you know what, I learned, and I can tell you I did, I learned through my personal auto repossession, a car is not worth fighting for. I want the most inexpensive car that I can still drive around that's somewhat reliable. Trust me, if Tampa had a decent bus system, I probably wouldn't even own a car. I'm only like 7 miles from work. Parents who rescue their kids financially. How are your kids ever going to make it to pay rent when it's high and you're not there? How are your kids ever going to learn what type of car they should drive based on their income, driving habits, okay? How are they going to learn what's worth fighting for? Is it really worth that SUV, or could you go down into a little mid-size or economy-size compact? In other words, as much as I am sure, at least I like to think, it hurt my parents to watch me go broke once, broke twice, and all the in-between brokes. They also knew, because they had 7 kids, if they go bailing these kids out of their financial mishaps, how are we ever going to learn by the time we're in our 40s, 50s, and 60s? How are we ever going to be able to establish ourselves financially? Because to establish yourself financially, you must know what is worth fighting for. And it's important to note that what's worth fighting for one person may not be financially worth it to someone else. I'm willing to make the sacrifices to be a member of a gym. For someone else, that may not be worth it, and they're happy with the little home gym or the apartment gym. In other words, what you're willing to fight for, the sooner you can figure it out, the easier your adult life will be, and more likely, oh, hold on just a second. That's my 10-minute buzzer. But let me finish my sentence. The more you realize that what you're willing to fight for, the earlier you can realize that, the easier time you will have accumulating wealth as you get older, and therefore you can rest and take it a little bit easier, because let's face it, folks, the fight will be over. My 10 minutes is up. So is yours. Don't forget to subscribe. Good night, everyone.